Imagine you're dropped into the wild with a newborn baby. No house, no hospital, no diapers, no formula, no baby monitor. Just you, the baby, and whatever is making that strange noise in the darkness. How long do you think that baby survives? A week? A day? An hour? Now here's the crazy part. For almost 300,000 years, every human baby was born into a world exactly like that. And somehow, they made it. In fact, they survived so well that there are now more than 8 billion of us. Which raises a very strange question. Why are human babies so unbelievably bad at being babies? Seriously, a baby horse can stand up within an hour. A baby giraffe can walk within minutes. Baby sea turtles hatch and immediately sprint toward the ocean like they already have a life plan. Human babies? They arrive looking confused. They can't walk, they can't talk, they can't even feed themselves. They can't even hold their own head properly. If a human baby were a smartphone, you'd return it immediately and ask if it came unfinished. So what happened? Why would evolution create such a helpless creature? Well, the answer is sitting inside your skull, your brain. Humans have the largest brains relative to body size of any animal on Earth. That's great news for building civilizations, not so great news for childbirth. Because if babies stayed in the womb long enough to fully develop those giant brains, their heads would become too large to fit through the birth canal, which is a problem, a very serious problem. So evolution came up with a compromise. Instead of finishing development before birth, humans finish a huge part of it afterward. In other words, human babies are basically born in beta version. The software update happens later, lots later. Scientists estimate that a newborn baby's brain is only about 25% of its adult size. That means most of the construction is still happening after birth. And while that's fantastic for learning, it creates another problem. A baby that can't do anything useful is going to need a lot of help, like an absurd amount of help. Which brings us to one of the biggest secrets behind human success. For most of history, mothers didn't raise babies alone. Actually, they couldn't. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies found that babies are often passed from person to person throughout the day. Mothers, grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, friends, neighbors. Basically anyone with functioning arms. At some points, a baby might be held by a dozen different people in a single day. Imagine trying to hand your baby to 12 different people today. Most parents would have a heart attack before lunch. But for our ancestors, this wasn't unusual. It was survival. Humans evolved as team players, and babies were group projects. That's right, long before group chats existed, humans had group parenting. But here's where things get even more interesting. Have you ever noticed that a crying baby often calms down the moment you pick them up? You rock them for a few seconds, suddenly they're quiet, almost like someone pressed a mute button. Well, scientists have actually studied this, and it turns out babies have what's called a transport response. When they're carried, their heart rate slows, their stress levels decrease, their body relaxes. Why? Because for most of human history, being carried usually meant safety. If danger appeared, adults grabbed the baby and moved, fast. A baby that stayed calm was easier to protect. A baby screaming at full volume? Not ideal when something with sharp teeth is nearby. So your baby's brain developed a simple rule. If an adult picks me up, everything is probably okay. Pretty smart for someone who still thinks their own feet are fascinating. And then there was food. Today, feeding a baby can involve bottles, sterilizers, apps, schedules, and approximately 17,000 parenting opinions on the internet. Ancient humans had none of that. For years, breast milk was the main food source. It wasn't just nutrition, it was hydration, medicine, immune protection. Basically, the original all-in-one subscription package. And when babies became old enough for solid food, things got a little weird. Actually, very weird. Adults would chew food first, then pass it directly to the baby. Yes, mouth to mouth. Before you make that face, remember this was thousands of years before blenders existed. People did what worked. To ancient parents, it was completely normal. To modern parents, it sounds like the fastest way to lose an argument on social media. But perhaps the most surprising part of this story involves grandmothers. Scientists have long wondered why human women often live decades after having children. Most animals don't do this. From an evolutionary perspective, it seems unusual. Then, researchers studying hunter-gatherer communities noticed something important. Grandmothers were incredibly valuable. They collected food, watched children, shared knowledge, helped exhausted mothers. In some cases, they dramatically increased a child's chance of survival. In other words, grandma wasn't just visiting. Grandma was part of the survival strategy. Some scientists even believe that human longevity evolved partly because helpful grandmothers gave families such a huge advantage. So if you've ever had a grandma sneak your child an extra cookie, you may be witnessing hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary programming. Now, let's jump back to the present, because this is where things get interesting. For almost all of human history, raising a child involved an entire community. Today, many parents are trying to do it with one or two adults, sometimes completely alone. And that's a huge difference. Imagine asking one person to perform a task that evolution designed 10 people to handle. Of course it's exhausting. Of course it's overwhelming. Of course it feels impossible some days. The surprising truth is that humans didn't become successful because our babies were strong. Our babies are ridiculously weak. We became successful because humans learned something even more powerful: cooperation. Every person alive today exists because somewhere in the distant past, a group of people helped keep one helpless child alive. Not because they had technology, not because they had hospitals, not because they had parenting books, but because they showed up. And maybe that's the real secret of human survival. Not bigger brains, not stronger bodies, just millions of years of humans helping other humans, especially the tiny ones who couldn't survive on their own. Which, if we're being honest, is still exactly how it works today.